to the Kanban Coaching Exchange. Good to see you all today. This evening, we've got a guy called Marco Ri joining us from Italy. So you'll notice his accent. But I first met Marco as part of the Kanban University. Marco was on his path to become an accredited Kanban consultant, which he was successful in. And part of that activity is to produce a case study to understand about how they've applied it within their own organizations. And Marco has an example which he's going to be telling you a little bit about tonight, but that example is a little bit something to the norm. It's not your average software company. And he's been working at this company for many, many years now. And so there's a real opportunity to go from different department to different department. And there's even more to be able to do as well. So Marco comes to us with absolutely oodles of real world experience. And you can actually find on the Kanban University website lots of contributions that he's made to the community. He does have his own blog, but sadly that is in Italian, unless you're an expert in that or great with Google Translate. So a wealth of experience all the way from Italy. Welcome, Marco. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're connecting from. I assume that the folks here are quite acquainted with Kanban, so I won't spend time to explain Kanban concept I will use, right? So this is I will speak assuming that you know what we are talking about. But to start my story, I won't start in an office and won't start in the company I will be talking about, but on a sailing boat. Actually, was a Friday, and actually is a bit of a fancy story of an experiment that started there. I was sailing in the Mediterranean with a friend, and we were exchanging professional stories about this and that. We were chit-chatting. And actually, the strange thing was that we converged on a topic, which was flow and efficiency. Except that I'm working on Kanban workflows and in Kanban and in business workflows. And my friend is active in big data and information systems. So actually, the things seem to be different, but actually we are aiming at the same goals, except that I measure things in days and hours, and he's measuring things in milliseconds. But more or less, we have discovered that we were doing the same thing. So this sparked the idea of a collaboration on this thing. But to understand where this led, we have to do a step back, and we have to get into the organization I was serving at the time, and I'm still serving with my consultancy. This is a social cooperative of 30,000+ people, which is operating public procurement, which for those of you who are not acquainted with this business is basically delivering social assistance services on behalf of the public administration, of the local government. I don't know how about other places in the world, but it's quite popular in Italy, where I am. This company is facing huge volumes and massive challenges because their work relies on winning tenders, and on a human intensive job to deliver their services. So whenever they win a tender, because these jobs are assigned on tenders, they have to onboard hundreds of people in a single shot in a time frame of a matter of days. And on the other hand, when they lose the tender, they might have to terminate hundreds of contracts in the same time span as they do the onboarding. So it's quite challenging. They were facing typical challenges of any company in this world, which is low predictability. When we started manually sampling the data, the lead times, we discovered that the lead times were scattered between 1 and 96 days, which is ridiculous. And so chaos was served and delivering services with a level of service was actually impossible. Of course, people were overburdened, and they were relying heavily on the manual processes. They were using a lot of Excel files. They had legacy systems, which were workflow systems, but those systems were perceived as basically clumsy and of little use. So basically, they were not using them, or very using them to catch up to display to the boss that they were using the system, but actually they were doing the work manually and then catching up on the system. So useless. So there was a fundamental lack of visibility, and we didn't have a clue of what the workflows were. So this was a starting point. So what we started to do was we did a static. So we did a system thinking approach to implementing Kanban. And we started drawing the workflows. The workflow, we started with onboarding. And we started with this approach, which is, as I branded, low tech, high touch, right? So as you can see, is a whiteboard with sticky notes and so on. We started mapping the workflow, and it worked. So we mapped this. Then later on remotely, we started identifying which were the steps. We draw the vertical bars you can see there. And then we put a virtual sticky this time with the red ones with to identify the various steps and so on. So we started having a workflow that was identified that we can work on. So and after that we started collecting metrics manually on an Excel file, right? Very basic stuff. And that was when we discovered the 1 to 96 days of lead time, right? Of data scatter across a wide range, which was out of control, basically. The good thing is that this manual collecting of data enabled us to understand where the biggest bottleneck was, which was the contract signature, which is T5, I reckon, and on the chart, and this is an electronic signature which is made with one of those typical systems where when you are sent a message, then you have to connect to a web portal. You are sent an OTP, one-time password on the mobile phone, and then you can sign the contract. So that kind of thing, and people got lost in the process. So actually, we saw that the pattern of the lead times of that specific step in the workflow was very similar to the pattern of the complete workflow. So we did expect that fixing that it was fixing the lead time for the whole workflow, and actually it did work because in doing that, fixing the signature step, actually we trimmed dramatically the tail of our lead time distribution. Actually, we halved it in 1 month, and then keeping working on it in 1 year, we have reduced it to 1/10 of what it was at the beginning. So typical Kanban results. after, but after having done the first implementation manually, we moved on to, as I said, no, I didn't say it, but we moved on to a Kanban board, an electronic Kanban board. So this is one of those not just displaying the cards on it, but also able to collect metrics underneath. So the image is not very sharp, but you can, if you could zoom in, you could see that the various T on top of the various columns. So the T codes. So actually, this was our Kanban board for 1 year, and actually did work because we started implementing all the Kanban practices and to develop iteratively, and we started the actual evolutionary development of the Kanban system and of the organization of this onboarding office. So being that it worked, we were asked to do the same thing for recruiting, which is the upstream flow to the onboarding one, which we did. So here it is. We follow the same approach. We defined the workflow. We set up the Kanban board. We started mapping the recruiting process. And actually, we discovered here something interesting because actually the workflow was actually split into two distinct phases. As a matter of fact, this was a two-tiered Kanban board because on the left we have the job ads flow, and on the right side we have the selection. And for each item in the job ads, we have several work items on the selection. So because for one job ad you have several, if not many, candidates that you have to process through the selection. So it was a clear visual way to see both levels of activity, and we could work very well. And it worked. Right, so this is a summary. This slide I skip because I've put it in for you later to see the summary of what I have told you. If we go and see the results, this was after 1 year the time distribution for the lead time distribution for onboarding. And actually, we had 97% of onboarding cases that were completely within 6 days, which was actually right for the purpose of what the onboarding people wanted to have and the business wanted to have. So we could offer a reasonable service level to the business. Say, if you ask us to onboard people, we can do it 97% of the times within 6 days. Job done. And actually 82% of the recruiting done in completely in 10 days-ish. Actually between 1-2 weeks, right? Recruiting has a different metric, is measuring weeks, whilst onboarding is measuring days. So here there is an interesting consideration because we use the on recruiting we use the 85th percentile, which is the typical threshold that we use in Kanban. Well, here it is 82, but more or less we are there. But for onboarding was a different story because on onboarding is a much more sensitive matter, and we need to we can apply the 85th percentile. The business didn't accept that because on onboarding you are getting the people to sign the contract, and if start working, if people start working without a contract, it's not just risky, it's illegal. So we couldn't afford that. And we cannot afford to have 15% of people working without a contract. You can imagine on a company of 3,000 plus people, how many people would be around without a contract working would be a nightmare. So already 3% is high. So we are heading for 99% at some stage, if possible. This is quite a standard process. So we can, if we can reach some higher level of service level rather than in other businesses in other situations. And moreover, this thing was not just about compliance, was about retention. I mean, if the people go to work without a contract, then the risk is that they begin to work, they work for a week, and then they are not happy of the work, and they say, you know what, I've not signed the contract yet, so goodbye, and they just quit, and you end up with a problem. So for all these reasons, we moved to have those metric of 90% and more. I will be cutting the story short here because, as Helen previously said, there is a case study about this thing, about this story on the Kanban Plus website, and you can go and read that. But here are the takeaways so far that we implementing Kanban for 1 year, we managed to reach these metrics. And we were a happy soldier, and except for some summit plateau syndrome, we were moving on well. But something that we didn't expect happened, right? And here starts the real story. That as workflows, both workflows were improving, people were becoming less burdened, which was great. And they were also starting to do evolutionary development of the Kanban system, which was great. And they were also doing some fixes on the legacy systems, which was great. And they started using the legacy systems, except that at some stage, when they started working very much on the legacy systems, and the flow was becoming steady and it was flowing well, they started seeing operating on the Kanban board as extra work. And they say, hang on a minute, why should I date every time also the Kanban board, move the cards on every time I do something when I am already doing the same thing on the legacy system? So can't you please integrate the two so that I'm not double accounting and wasting time, right? So, and the worst thing was that they started forgetting to move cards. Basically, they were quitting the Kanban system, and we didn't want that. So we started to think how to go about it, and we started thinking seriously about the fact of integrating the two things together. Except that, unfortunately, we had parts of the system that were completely out of our control, because the last step of the workflow, which is basically on the system, on the regional government information system, which is the system where you send the communication that you've hired people, so that they know that those people are not anymore entitled to receive unemployment subsidies. It's part of the definition of done of our workflow. So actually we need that step in the process, but that step is completely out of our control. And actually, the only thing we receive from that information system is a PDF receipt with a timestamp, which is the official one that the step is finished and the process is finished, and the key, the reference, the tax number of the guys, which is the identifier of the position, but actually that's the only thing we have. So we started thinking the other way around. So we started thinking that if we could do something else, which was starting from the legacy systems and in some way to transfer our Kanban system onto the legacy systems. And this is where my winter sailing chit-chatting came to use, because we realized that in the legacy system we had a gold mine of data already there, and actually we could, because every action, every approval, every click, anything you do on the legacy system is recorded and is time-stamped and logged somewhere. So if we were able to collect all those data and collect them into and put them into a workflow, then we could have automatically metrics about those workflows. So so we moved on from there, and actually we exploited this platform, this data lake platform to connect all these data sets and reconstruct the workflow starting from the data, right? And this was exactly what we did. So in other words, instead of relying on a separate Kanban system, on a separate Kanban board, we moved onto the legacy systems, and we used the data lake system. This is called Algorillia, to collect data and to display those data onto a dashboard, right? And the idea was to get the dashboard to become our Kanban board and our visualization tool. So basically, this is the architecture you have in front of you. The workflow, the complete workflow, is made of 5 systems. And on the right, on the background, the green background is the regional system information, the regional information system, sorry, which is part of the definition of done, which is the one sending you the final receipt. And it starts on the left with a form, with a Microsoft form, which is somewhat tribal, where the people of the business fill the form on Kanban form, and this form is feeding an Excel file. So there we have an Excel file. Then next step, we have the recruiting system, which is a workflow system, and which for some strange reason that we have never understood is exporting 3 separate Excel files, and that we have to combine them with a query. Then we have the onboarding system, which is another workflow system, and good boy is exporting one single file with all the timestamps. And then we have the HR payroll system, which is the 4th step on the flow of the macro flow, which is exporting again an Excel file. And then we have the regional system, which is basically delivering PDF files into the file system. So collecting all these data, which are not homogeneous at all, and combining them into the data lake, we were able to display them and to have all the typical Kanban metrics we are accustomed to, and also we were able to implement the Kanban practices because we were able to we be able not yet to implement weekly means but to start with we had lead times, throughput, cumulative flow diagram, and that was it for the beginning, but we are moving on from there. So going on, we did set up the workflow. The system, the data lake system works like this, that you have to provide the system an hypothesis of which is the workflow. And we did provide what we know, what we didn't know. And this is recruiting. We connected all the various bits. And this was the expected onboarding. So this basically was the this is what we did to start with, and this is part of the data lake system as it is and as it works, regardless of where it is applied, if to business workflows or to whatever else it is applied. The interesting thing is that we could load on the system all the historical data. Each and every data record was uploaded to the platform. So basically, we could collect data, we could combine the data, analyze them, and then visualize them, right? This is again the slide summarizing what we already said. And moving on, here was what we could display on the data lake system when we started to display data. So each stage of the process appears as a box, all right, showing how many work items are currently there. So the WIP is shown in the boxes. And we can see how the process works. The arrows connecting the boxes are displaying the average time that it takes to move from one stage to the next. Actually, each arrow represents the duration of the step on its left, right? This is a state diagram. And for instance, the time for CV received, which is the first one in this flow, so the arrow between CV received and screening successful is showing how long the screening takes, right? So each arrow is displaying the time it takes to do the step which is on its left. By the way, as Kanbaneers, we don't like very much the average time, but then comes the surprise over the next slides that, as I already said, we had the typical Kanban matrix. But actually, the visualization works because here we have the workflow, we have the WIP, we have the average times, and on the bottom, we have the list of all the work items, which are hashed and masked for the sake of the simulation, but they could display the name of the candidates that are recruited. So we could even display real data from the systems once the system is completely implemented. So this is the recruiting. We had also the same thing on onboarding. And actually here we made an interesting discovery because as you can see, the last average time on the right is negative and is still displayed in milliseconds. The negative values are still in milliseconds. But as we know that there's not such thing as a negative time to move on. So actually the system had identified a mistake that we did into our understanding on the flow. So we had actually accidentally swapped two steps. This was a mistake we did in putting the workflow into the system. And actually, when we realized that, yes, of course, we already knew that was the two steps were swapped, right? But in other situations where you are actually using the tool to discover the workflow, this may help you to understand that the reality of the workflow, right? So by mistake, as very often happens for the humankind, we discovered a feature of the system that could help us to make exploration in the next workflows. And the most interesting thing for us was that we were able to assemble the end-to-end flow. I mean, this department, the people of this department, are aiming at reaching maturity level 3 in the Kanban maturity model, and to reach maturity level 3, you must have an end-to-end workflow all connected, and you must have a consistent Kanban system end-to-end. So we did need to have this kind of metrics. Is not sufficient, but we need to have those metrics to reach maturity level 3. So actually, this was very, very useful to carry on our work. And actually, here is the high level view where we see that we have the average time that it takes for doing recruiting, which is on the left. And the second step on the right is the average time that it takes to do the onboarding. And by the way, we are not happy with average times because we are not sure that we can rely on those values on the average time. So here they come metrics. This was the new thing that we implemented together with the people running the data lake system. On the left-hand side of the dashboard, we have the throughput. The run chart in the middle is the throughput is the overall throughput of the recruiting, and then we have two other the possibility to monitor other two throughputs through other steps in the flow which are critical. And on the right-hand side, we have the cumulative flow diagram, which is stable because those rows are relatively homogeneous. But actually, we were testing the system on something which had already been doing Kanban for 1 year and had already been taken to maturity level 2, and actually was already working pretty well before we did this. If we were applying this stuff to something new, which has not been gone through the Kanban evolutionary path, probably we would find those values much less homogeneous and with bumps and pockets in the rows. On top right, we have the lead time distribution, which is slightly worse than those previously measured manually and on the electronic Kanban board. But we did expect that because those metrics, the previous metrics, were still made mostly on a sample basis. Here we have each and every record that has been processed through the system. So actually is a much more reliable thing. And by the way, the good news was that, yes, they are slightly worse, but not that much. And that actually was a confirmation that we were on the right on the right path to improve the system and to get it better and better. So this was actually recruiting, and also for onboarding, the metrics were largely confirming what we had already seen with the previous system. And actually here you can see that on the left hand side we have in the middle the total throughput, and the run chart on the bottom left actually is the infamous contract signature step that we want to monitor to keep it under control. And nowadays is comparable to the overall workflow, and is nice and steady and fast. But 1 year and a half ago, no, actually it's 2 years ago now, was clumsy and creating a lot of chaos. And then we have the metrics of the whole thing. I mean, this is the combined end-to-end metric. And actually here we have we have spotted something that actually the backlog of work of CVs that have to be processed, which is the blue band on top of the cumulative flow diagram, tends to grow, and actually tends to grow because actually when they receive CVs, they have never dumped after they keep receiving CVs, and they keep loading CVs, and and if they discard the candidates on the very beginning of the step of the workflow, then they tend not to remove the records from the system. So it was pointing out a different kind of problem, which is that we need to clean up the system from time to time and remove the CVs that are not anymore valid. And so wrapping up the experiment and the presentation, basically the data-driven analysis has enabled us to visualize the operational reality much better than we could do by other means. So we have been able to measure flows, we have been able to identify anomalies, we have been able to identify blockers, we have been able to identify when there was a catch-up on the system. There was a record that we have branded as the Speedy Gonzalez recruit, because it was done in a matter of minutes, which was not possible, of course. But probably the people were just catching up of some records that they had not had time to input in the system. So we have been able also to adjust all these operational things. The idea here is that if given that the experiment works, has worked, and the system works, the idea is to exploit the same approach to implement the Kanban system across the whole company, to scale Kanban across the whole 3,000 plus company and across all the workflows of the company, with the aim to end up with an end-to-end flow from each and every workflow in the business, and to provide the top management with metrics and a real control of everything is happening within the workflows, and to have a real grasp on the operation. And moving on, we are planning to do more things, right? So we want to, I presented this thing to the last Kanban leadership retreat and have been collecting a number of interesting inputs from colleagues. And actually, for instance, have been suggested to introduce also other metrics such as flow efficiency, which we are going to implement. And another thing we want to implement is, and actually we wanted to do it before, but we have not done it yet, was to be able to implement WIP limits. We are not able to enforce WIP limits, of course. There are limitations on this system because, of course, if you work on a tool which is aimed at managing a Kanban system, you may enforce WIP limits. In other words, you can have the cards that bounce back if they are exceeding WIP limits. You can set the system up in that way. Here you can't. You're just recording data coming from other systems. So if you want to enforce WIP limits, you have to do it somewhere else. But you can have an alert, and the idea is to turn the WIP to a different color if the WIP limits is exceeded, so we can manage the whole thing. Another thing we want to do is to display policies, for instance, in a panel somewhere, and so on, to go on to develop all sorts of possible things that we can do. And the interesting thing that we are thinking, and we are planning to do some experimentation over the next months in this direction, is that if we could apply this approach not on a system which is relatively grown up in Kanban terms because it has already been running for a while. If we could this immediately when we start doing a static on a new situation, actually we might discover and be able to help us to discover the flow and collect metrics from day one. So we could start on day one of our job in implementing static, having metrics that can help us to improve things, right? We do expect to find things much clumsier than we have found out in this situation. But in this situation, we were mostly testing the system, not testing the HR department. I mean, we had already done some work with the HR department. From now onwards, we can use the system and exploit the system to improve the HR department. But the idea at the beginning was to test the system. But for the next coming situation, we might be using this to help us discover what's going on in the reality of the organization we are starting helping with Kanban. On top of that, we are also exploring the use of AI to try to analyze less structured data set, such as emails and chats and so on, to try to help us to define to help us to define and identify workflows. To be frank, it's difficult. We have not managed yet to reach some good and some satisfactory point, because actually we are missing what is quite important in the data set, which is a key, which is enabling us to connect all the data. And if we are in this workflow, we had the tax code that each person has in the country that has to be recorded everywhere. So we have the key, which is the tax code, which is enabling us to connect all the data. If you have less structured data sets, then you might be missing the keys, and then it becomes more difficult. And hence the idea of using AI to enable us to try to discover patterns, but there is still a lot of work to do on that, and we are not yet happy with the result. But apart from that, the more the work on the more structured data set is very promising, I must say, and we are very happy with that.